Shrimpton, Knox, Boyea, I welcome you here to this evening's Maundy Thursday commemoration from First Parish Church in Manchester by the Sea. We welcome you here this evening as we begin the final stages of the only week in the Christian year that is designated as holy. The word Maundy is believed to come from the Latin word mandatum, which is where the word mandate comes from, command. And this night is called Maundy Thursday in recognition of the words that Jesus shared with his disciples, the mandate that he gave them on the final night that he shared with them during his earthly life. Words from John's Gospel, what we know as the Great Commandment. As I have loved you, you are to love one another. Tonight, we will be recalling the events of Jesus' final hours through the reading of Mark's Gospel. We will be interspersing passages from Mark with music and with the extinguishing of the candles on the perimeter of this table, 2 by 2, to commemorate the desertion of Jesus' closest followers on that final night, leaving at the end only the one candle in the center. That will be extinguished at the very end of our time together, and it will signify the end of this commemoration and the end of our live stream broadcast. With that, I invite you to join me in the opening prayer that is on the bulletin that you were sent online. Holy One, tonight we once again join Jesus on the final hours of his earthly journey. The way is hard. It is so difficult to keep going as the night gets darker, as the hearts of those who reject the light of your ways grow darker with each passing hour. The same darkness that falls over our own hearts at times. But we will walk on. And as candle after candle is extinguished, we will rely on your light to keep guiding our way, tonight and every night. And we will proclaim to the very end the words Jesus gave us to help light that way in all our days, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. My friends, the Tenebrae ceremony is an adaptation of an early 4th century worship time. The rule of silence is strictly observed. Scripture, and music, and reflection interpret the devotional significance of this night, while the gradual extinguishing of the lights symbolizes the desertion of the disciples during this last evening. On the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed, Jesus' disciples said to him, Where do you want us to go and make the preparations for you to eat the Passover? So Jesus sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. And wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, The teacher asks, Where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there. So those disciples set out and went to the city and found everything as Jesus had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, Jesus came with the 12. And when they had taken their places and were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." And the rest began to be distressed and say to him one after another, "Surely not I." But Jesus said to them, "It is one of the 12, one who is dipping bread into the bowl with me. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born." And while they were eating, he took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to them, and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave that to them, and all of them drank from it. He said to them, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly, I tell you, I will never again drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God." Then when they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said to them, "You will all become deserters. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I'm raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." And then Peter said to him, "Even though all become deserters, I will not." But Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this day, this very night, before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." But Peter said vehemently, "Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all of them said the same. They went to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray." He took with him Peter and James and John, and he began to be distressed and agitated. He said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. So remain here and keep awake." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it were possible at all, the hour might pass from him. He said, "Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me. Yet, not what I want, but what you want. And then he came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. For the spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. And again Jesus went away and prayed, saying the same words. And once more he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy. And they didn't know what to say to him. Then he came a third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough! The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. So get up and let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. Immediately while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, and with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, the one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. So when he came, he went up to Jesus at once and said, Rabbi, and kissed him. Then they laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. But one of those who stood near drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. And then Jesus said to them, have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you didn't arrest me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled. And all deserted him and fled. A certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. And they caught hold of him. But he left the linen cloth and ran off naked.
At the cry of the first bird, they began to crucify thee, O swan. Never shall a man cease because of that. It was like the parting of day from night. So was the suffering borne by the body of Mary's Son. But sorer still to him was the grief which for his sake came upon his mother.
They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. And he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death. But they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands.'" But even on this point, their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent and refused to answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" And this time Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You've heard this blasphemy. What is your decision?" All the council condemned him as deserving death. Some even began to spit on him, to blindfold him, and to strike him, saying to him, "Prophesy." The guards also took him over and beat him. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, that man from Nazareth." But Peter denied it, saying, "I don't know or understand what you are talking about." And then he went out into the forecourt. Then a cock crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him, began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again Peter denied it. Then after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you're one of them, for you are a Galilean." Now Peter began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I don't know this man you're talking about." And at that very moment, the cock crowed for the second time. And Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you'll deny me 3 times." And Peter broke down and wept. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. And the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "You say so." Then the chief priests accused Jesus of many things, and Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you?" But Jesus made no further reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now at the festival, Pilate used to release a prisoner for all the county, anyone from whom they asked. Now a man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Then Pilate answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed Jesus over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the king of the Jews?" And they shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him!" So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, had him handed over to be crucified.
And my salvation, the Lord is my light and my salvation. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Oh, whom shall I fear? Oh, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Whom shall I fear? Oh, in the time of trouble, He will hide me. In the time of trouble, He will hide me. In the time of trouble, oh, He will hide me. Whom shall I fear? Oh, whom shall I fear? Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. trouble he will hide me. So wait on the Lord and be of good courage. Wait on the Lord and be of good courage. Oh, he shall strengthen your heart. Whom shall I fear? Oh, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I fear?
Then the soldiers led Jesus into the courtyard of the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort. And they clothed Jesus in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And then they began saluting him. "Hail, King of the Jews!" They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. And then after mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on. Then they led him out to crucify him. On the way, they compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place, skull. And there they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And then they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9:00 in the morning when they crucified Jesus. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified two bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from that cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking Jesus among themselves and saying, "He saved others, but he can't save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." And those who were crucified with him also taunted him. While he was at Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of nard. And she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on Jesus' head. But some were there who said to one another in anger, "Why was the ointment wasted in this way? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and the money given to the poor." They scolded the woman. But then Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for its burial. And so truly, I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her." This night is so different. So different than the last night that we were all together at the same table for dinner. It was just a few days ago in Bethany at Simon's house. Simon. That was so Jesus. Of all the dinner invitations that we got when we first arrived in Bethany, he accepts the one from the guy with a skin disease. But, like I said, that was just Jesus. The lost and the forgotten and the unwanted and the outcasts were drawn to him. And he was drawn to them. The thing is, we'd all gotten used to it after a while, so the fact of the matter is, we were really having a good time at Simon's house that night for dinner. And then she showed up. A woman. Just out of nowhere. Walked into Simon's house and walked right up to Jesus as we were all at the table. None of us knew who she was. None of us had ever seen her before. But there she was. And before any of us could react, she had taken out a jar of ointment, what turned out to be really expensive ointment, broken it open, and just poured the whole thing over Jesus' head. And never said a word the whole time. Just like that. I didn't say a word either. I was stunned, speechless. Some of the other guys, well, they weren't speechless. They started right in on that woman. They were angry, complaining that she had used that expensive ointment just to pour over Jesus' head, complaining that if she wanted to get rid of it that badly, she could have sold it. It would have gone for a lot of money, and then she could have given that money to the poor or to people like Simon who needed it. On and on and on they went, till finally Jesus just said, "Hey, stop, enough. I get it," he said. That ointment could have been sold for a lot of money. And that money could have been given to the poor. It would have been a great thing. It would have been the practical thing. But then he said, But you have to remember that sometimes life isn't about being practical. And more importantly, you have to remember that love isn't always about being practical. Sometimes love needs to be extravagant, wild, reckless. Sometimes love is about just taking that jar of whatever the best it is that you have and breaking it open and pouring it out over somebody before it's too late. Not because they deserve it, not because they've earned it, not because they're entitled to it, but just because you love them. You know, like the same way God loves you. Before he finished saying all that in their defense, though, the woman was gone. She came as quietly and secretively as she had arrived. We still don't know who she is. None of us have seen her since. But I'll tell you one thing. If she showed up on this night, I'd welcome her with open arms. If she showed up this night, I'd hug her and I'd give her my seat at the table, because on this night, we sure could have used some of that kind of impractical, extravagant, wild, reckless love. We sure could have used some of that break open the jar and pour the best of what you have all over Jesus' head. Because instead, on this night, we put our jars away, locked them up, and threw away the keys. And now I hear he's on his way to a Roman cross. And all that keeps going through my mind is what he said about her when the rest of us were just complaining about how she had wasted that ointment. How she had wasted all of that ointment and that breaking in of love on that night. That breaking in of love that she shared and we didn't. All that keeps running through my mind is what he said about her. She has performed a good service for me. She has done what she could. If only we had done the same. Maybe this night would have turned out a lot differently.
Crucified my Lord. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they rose up from the grave? Were you there when he rose up from the grave? Sometimes I feel like singing, glory, glory.